This is going to be a quick little video to show you how to import in a CAD model and using relationships, create the features that you can just measure into and actually see results um, as you're taking the measurements of how your part looks as compared to the CAD model from which it was made. So step one is going to be to keep the job file organized. I'm going to create a collection. I'm going to call it CAD, and that's what I'm going to import my CAD data, my nominal data into. And so to do that, I'm just going to come up here and use the auto import tool. And I'm working in millimeters. So in this particular case, I'm just going to simply bring in my my part, which is in millimeters. It's a cat part, so it's going to do. I don't have to step it out or create an IGES. I can import in the native CAD from a lot of different CAD formats. But this gives me an opportunity to say, what do I want to bring in? And so for this case, I'm not going to really worry about bringing in annotations or points or curves. All I really want are the surface. Is the surfaces. So I'm just going to tell it that's what I'm going to bring in. I'll hit OK, and there's our surface model. I'm just going to hide the world frame for now. That's a little difficult to see, so I'm going to shade it, showing the edges. So shading with edges, shading without the edges, that looks a little better. So what I'd like to do now is actually create some features in here that I want to measure. Let's say we have a datum A plane on top and a datum B plane on this front face, maybe a datum C on this side, and then I want to just measure, a couple of holes, just for example purposes, and then a couple of surfaces, so we can take a look at what in GD&T would be a profile check, but perhaps we're just wanting to take and say we want to align to our features, and we want to see how far off the machine surface is from what it should be. So the first thing I'm going to do, again, just kind of keep things clean, is I'm going to right click and create a new collection, and I'm going to call this my measured data, so that now everything that goes into this I know compares to the CAD. And this lets me kind of turn things on and off really quickly by keeping them segregated by this. And it's just something that I do. You don't necessarily have to do this. You can put everything in collection A, and that is totally fine. So I'm going to make use of what we call the SA toolkit. So to find it, I'm just going to right click up in empty space up in here, and this gives me an opportunity to turn on various toolbars like the report bar, the toolkit bar, inspection bar. So let's open up the toolkit. In here we have GD&T annotation construction that you can use. I can create relationships, or let's just call these features. So I can have measure features as circles and planes and cylinders, ellipses and cones, or frames even. Inspection is essentially my task list. This is really the interface that you're going to be seeing as the operator for what was constructed ahead of time, which is really nice because now I have a list of items that I can just say, okay, here's what I have to inspect, and when I inspect all these features, then I'm done. Some analysis tabs and some reporting tabs that give you quick access. Everything that you can get to here, it can also be found through the menu commands at the top. So let's just kind of quickly go through and demonstrate how we would do this. Let's say the top of our part is this datum A plane. So I would just simply key in what I want my plane that I'm going to measure to be named. If I use this button, it just creates only the plane. If I come down and select this one, it tells me, well, I can left click and pick a plane from a CAD face, and it goes ahead and makes an association. So it's going to prompt me to measure data to construct a plane, and then it's going to compare that plane to the nominal feature that I select. So I'm going to left click that button and just simply pick this plane for my planar face. And so we'll see a new entity get constructed over here in the tree. So I have relationships as a category, and I have a datum A. And you see, well, there's no point specified. there is a nominal plane that got constructed when I selected that face. And this grayed out measured GR datum A just simply means it's really a placeholder. If I look at the properties of that, it'll tell you this is a placeholder for geometry relationship, and the geometry is invalid. In other words, it's not defined until I get at least 3 points into it to define it. It's just a placeholder, but it's nice because I can reference this later on. And so that's going to be our datum A plane. So I'm just going to hit enter to clear the note, come up and change this to datum B. And again, do the same process, but I'll just select this front face, enter datum C. And if I come over here and I right click on this, I can pick, as long as, then they do need to be planar, the faces that I select, and I'll hit enter and it creates that reference for datum C. All right, so I have that in place. And now we can come in and measure, perhaps we want to call this the large bore hole in the front. And if I want to measure this as a cylinder, I can do that. A lot of times I'll measure this feature as a circle. And if I'm doing that, I want to project that to a plane. And so the plane that I want to project to would be my datum A, but not the nominal, but I want to use the measured plane that I take to project that circle onto. And now I can just pick a circle from a CAD cylinder. So when I select this, I want to pick in, the side of the hole that I'm going to be measuring to or want to project to. If I pick down here, it's going to project to the bottom, but I'll pick up near this end, and hopefully that comes across in the CAD, or in your view, but it created the circle at the expense of that whole wall. So we'll do large bore. We'll call this one our center. Up in here, pick this guy again, come in here, and then I'll just call, we'll call this our whole pattern. And we'll just say 1. And I'll select 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's do one more, and we'll measure the slot just to show that we can do that. And again, all these are projecting to our datum A plane. So I'm going to come down here and pick slot from CAD, and again, select the same. And it's going to create that slot. So these are all features that show up in the tree as I've named them over here, and we can measure. So it's not just limited to only geometries. We can also use this button down in here to measure some other features that we can use as well. So in this case, we're going to pick, let's do our vertical surface. And I will select, in this case, I'll right click on it because I want to do points to CAD faces. So I'm going to right click and just simply, I don't have points, so I'm going to hit enter and I'm going to select that face and enter when done. And then we'll do one more. We'll just call this our rounded corner. And I'll do the same thing again. Right click on that icon, points to CAD faces. Don't have any points yet, but I am going to pick that rounded corner right there, and we'll say done. So it creates what we call a relationship. The points that come into here are going to be compared to these particular faces. And we can go ahead up front and do some things. If we look at the properties of these and say, you know what, let's go ahead and create a vector group with that. And our projection properties, we'll ignore anything that's off of the edge. And we'll say OK. And I can also, if I had a lot of these, I could say I want to take those settings and I want to apply them to other like relationships. In other words, the auto vectors setting, the projection settings, so that I don't have to do this for every single one. as they come through, and so you'll see I have some vector groups down in here, and we can change the properties on that to maybe show tubes. That looks awful big for millimeters for the blot size, so let's just pick 5 millimeters for size and 100 magnification. And again, we will apply these settings to all the vector groups so that we get some consistency in how we're reporting our measurements. So when I hit this, I'm really kind of done at this point. What is nice about this is now that I've gone here and constructed this, we can just utilize this list. And so if I were to add my instrument, which let's go ahead and add our arm, and I'll go ahead and start it up. I'm not going to connect to it because I don't really have an arm here. I'm going to just run this in a simulation, and I'm going to use the toolbar across the top, and that's, looks different. Perhaps you're used or more accustomed to this interface for the arm. If not, if so, let me encourage you to, especially with the arm, use this particular mode in here. Oops. And what this enables you to do is the arm is always sitting in measure mode. So I just have to start pressing the trigger, and I'm going to get either single points or stream of points depending on how I have it set up. So in this particular case, all I have to do to get started is simply hit the back button or side button on the arm, and it will jump me into measuring these datums. And as I measure enough points for datum A, I just simply right click and it will have the same effect as hitting this button, and we'll go through datum B, datum C, full pattern 1, and it's going to highlight you around the part as you need to go to take the measurements, and for the vertical surface it'll highlight what you need to measure. So that's kind of really nice to do. Some other things I would encourage you to do is when you go through this is go ahead and just have the report bar open, because when you do, you'll see the results pop in here. The only thing that I am unable to kind of show you at this point because I don't have an arm is my first step before I would do this would be to simply just do a quick align to the part, and I would just take 6 points on the part that lock out all degrees of freedom to get the part aligned closely. Then once I have that done, then I can take these measurements, see the results show up on the screen. But that gets you started kind of quickly, and then there's a lot more we can do inside of this to create call-out views that we can create an associated inspection call-out. So it's kind of nice so that you can actually maybe even see the results and not have to have the report bar open. You'd actually see it on the screen. So the nice thing with this is, again, as I go through this, those call-out views pop into place, and I can set views as well. So hopefully that gets you started. Play with